Hi ladies, welcome to the notes on types of speciation. If you remember correctly, last time we were discussing geographic isolation. We have this idea that separation of species can frequently be due to changes in geographic location, dispersal to some isolated locations. So we're going to look at some more specific examples now. First example that I want to talk about is called allopatric speciation. And allopatric actually comes from some Greek word roots. Allos meaning different, and patris meaning fatherland. So if we take a look at this type of speciation, allopatric speciation refers to speciation due to extrinsic barriers. And these extrinsic barriers are between populations, and those barriers can be pretty much anything that would essentially reduce or stop gene flow between the population. So we have this idea here that when we look at evolution and how this is occurring, we're looking at changes in frequency of alleles. And we have this idea that alleles were different variations of genes. So if we don't have organisms in different populations sharing genes, or in this case mating and creating offspring, we reduce or stop that gene flow between the populations. And I would point out that this actually doesn't have to be complete isolation. That isolation just needs to be enough that we are greatly reducing gene flow. So the example I have for you here is population of lizards. I'm sure that you recognize this particular scenario from lab. In this particular one, they live near an active volcano. There is a lava flow that forms a geographic barrier, and it splits the population into two. After several generations, the lizards are going to no longer interbreed. And that could be several different things. That could be some behavioral isolation with courtship routines, or it could be something different with the temporal isolation in nocturnal versus diurnal. When are they active? The second type of speciation that I want to discuss then is parapatric. Parapatric is a little bit tough because it's a special kind of allopatric speciation. So similar to what we saw with the allopatric speciation, in this case, there is some kind of extrinsic barrier that reduces or stops gene flow. So in this case, organisms are not interbreeding. They are not creating offspring that would carry genes from both populations. And in this particular instance, what makes this a special version of allopatric is the idea that one population has very few individuals. So hopefully as you're kind of thinking about this, this kind of brings to mind that idea that we talked about with genetic drift. Remember, genetic drift acts more quickly on small populations. This also goes back to that idea of the worksheet when we talked about the frogs. If you only have 5 frogs versus 1,000 frogs, it's a very different probability of having the same or similar genes within the new population. It's much easier to change those allele frequencies when you don't have as many individuals. So the example I have here is a population of fruit flies that lives together in an island. Let's say that a hurricane carries a small portion of that initial population to another island. Only some of that population survive the trip. Some of those flies in the new island alter their mating dances after several generations. When the initial population is brought together with the new population, they no longer can mate because the mating dances do not match. So here again we see some kind of behavioral isolative piece that is actually causing the difference. And it looks very, very similar to this lizard example. The main difference here is that the small population of fruit flies, it truly is a small proportion. So that is it for allopatric and parapatric speciation. Stay tuned, and next time we will discuss sympatric and parapatric speciation.